The world around us is changing faster than ever before. Ideas once only imagined in science fiction are becoming a reality. Throughout the course of our amazing 23-episode season, we'll speak to some of the greatest minds in robotics and artificial intelligence to discuss the groundbreaking work that's fueling it all. I'm your host, Ryan Myrehn. Join me and my co-host, Paul Mitchell, the president of the Indy Autonomous Challenge, and see why we call this the Inside Track. Today, we have a very special guest coming to us from the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. Senior Vice President David Watkins sits down to discuss the future of the automobile industry in conjunction with the rapid development of autonomous technology and how the IAC is helping to keep the United States at the forefront of advanced manufacturing.
Well, David, great to have you on the program talking about the state of Indiana and the Indy Autonomous Challenge. And state of Indiana, it's even in the name of the Indy Autonomous Challenge. So let's start right there. For the state of Indiana, for the Economic Development Corporation, of which you are a part, what made this a project worthy of your support?
Yeah, well, thank you, Ryan, for having me on. And part of my role at the IEDC and part of how we envision supporting economic development across the state includes innovation, entrepreneurship, technology commercialization. And when we think about the history of motorsport in Indiana, obviously there's a lot that goes on the innovation side that has been going on for decades. A lot of modern day automotive innovations happened in Indiana as part of the motorsports industry. And so when we flip that on its head and kind of look at like, well, what comes next, right? What does the industry look like in 30, 40, 50 years? Clearly there has been a movement and there was an opportunity to explore what autonomous racing might look like. And not that there's that's the sole purpose, but that there's a lot of technology that can be tested in some of the harshest of conditions, right? You and I probably won't be going 180, 190 miles an hour around an oval.
Let's hope.
In our personal cars. These cars obviously do. And, but what we're learning from the technology can be applied to us when we're going 70 miles an hour on the interstate. Right.
I mean, what's striking to me is that while the racing or the time on the track, that's what people think of when they think of Indy Autonomous Challenge, but that's not necessarily the end goal here.
Right.
That's the conduit to get people to start thinking about these problems in a different way. And is there a more fun and exciting way to start thinking about problems like these than with race cars?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. And I think all you have to do is look at this and understand that it's different, it's new, it's innovative. And again, the piece for us as a state economic development group is not the racing aspect. It really is the technology. It really is the innovation. It really is pushing the edge of the industry. It's the industry engagement. It's working with the partners that have come together to support the Indy Autonomous Challenge, the Ciscos and the Luminars and the other companies that have signed up and said, yeah, we'd like to have our technology on this car to test it together, to test it at high speeds, to test it in environments that are real life, but also, the beauty of having an autonomous vehicle is that it can also be virtual. I mean, it because there's so much software essentially and code behind what these cars are doing. There's a real opportunity actually to have both sides, but you can't beat the opportunity to have student teams from across the world working on cars here in Indianapolis.
And I think you alluded to the history of this state, and maybe we do need to roll back the clock a little bit to the beginning of the 20th century, because the state of Indiana at that time was looked at in the same way we look at Michigan and Detroit now, as a real hub for the auto industry. And when you talk about the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, where the Indy Autonomous Challenge made its debut, the founders of that track built that track specifically to be a proving ground for automotive technology. And what struck me during that first event when we were broadcasting it was what the Arthur Newbys of the world and Carl Fischers of the world, the founders of the Speedway, they would have loved this.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you could almost do a side by side, right? Like the things that were getting tested back then obviously are now widely accepted in automotive technology. Who knows where this is going to end up? I mean, but the fact of the matter is that we're exploring what autonomous technology looks like in a race car, in a racing environment. Where that technology ends up down the line, safety features, again, both professional and personal side, opportunities for the software improvement. I mean, we don't quite know where the end is, but that's okay, right? We're trying to, in a very intentional way, make sure that Indiana stays on the edge of that innovation, on the leading edge of that innovation, right here. Obviously, that's our focus.
And how important is it to have such a publicly facing program like this to advertise to the world that this is a state that's very interested in being on the cutting edge?
Hugely important. I mean, one of the big parts of the Indy Autonomous Challenge is obviously the engagement with universities across the world. These are the leading institutions, researchers, the next generation of talent that are taking their time and their effort and their classes to work on an autonomous car here in Indiana. That obviously isn't lost on us. It's not lost on them. It's an opportunity again for Indiana to say, we do really cool things here. We build really cool things here. We do really cool things here. And, keeping Indiana at the forefront of certainly automotive and autonomous innovation, but plenty of other areas where we're looking at Indiana as a hub for global innovation.
At the heart of the challenge is this essence of competition and the belief that competition drives everything forward. And there is a huge competition for talent across the board, but certainly from your point of view, that's one area where Indiana is competing not just with other states in the U.S., but globally as well. Can you talk about what that competition looks like and how a program like the IAC plays into your pitch?
Well, look, I mean, motorsport is global, right? Like if anything, the last couple of years have taught us that, there's a real appetite for all different types of racing and motorsport. But perhaps most interestingly, though, is that the Indy Autonomous Challenge kind of opens up a whole new talent pipeline, if you will, that was much more focused on software and electrical engineering than would traditionally be associated with motorsport.
Sure.
I had an opportunity to visit with Dallara, which makes the chassis for the car in Italy. And one of their graduate students who's working at the facility, I expected him to be super excited about, hey, Indianapolis, you work at Dallara, you must be a huge Indy 500 fan, right? He was a fan. I wouldn't say there was a overly enthusiastic, but boy, we pivoted to the Indy Autonomous Challenge and it was lights on. And he was, a graduate student in Italy getting a degree in electrical engineering.
I think that's an interesting point because really the crux of this podcast has been how things that appear very different on the surface actually are very intertwined today more than ever. Elements of the technological world with the automotive world, with the mechanical world, all of these things come together. Certainly that's true in the race car that's sitting right behind us, and that's true in the story that you tell there, where people who might not have thought of automotive necessarily as the ultimate outcome of their studies in something like electrical engineering or in software coding or what have you. But you have to have all of these things working in concert in just about anything you produce today.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And that's the attractive piece for us as well, is that there is a global pipeline in these particular areas, and this is a way in which that global pipeline comes together. Yes, again, it's a race car, but we probably could have chosen any other kind of vehicle, that we wanted to, and we would still be engaging with a lot of the same talent from across the world that is dedicated to trying to improve and solve the issues that have been happening, but also drive the innovation to the next level.
You also could have chosen to have one or two race cars and probably accomplish some of the same goals, but instead the investment was made in, I believe, 10 of these phenomenal pieces of equipment, over $1 million each invested into these cars. And that's before they hit walls and each other and everything that comes along with pushing the envelope in a competition like this. So I suppose the basic question is simply why?
Well, if you're going to do something, let's do it at a level that's worth doing. But I'd say, this is a partnership. The Indy Autonomous Challenge has done an outstanding job bringing in corporate partners, again, who are interested in testing their technology in these conditions as well. But certainly the demand was there from universities across the world. I mean, these universities wanted the opportunity to engage in a real life opportunity to educate their students, build out their technology. And so, I think all of those pieces kind of came together to say, well, this isn't going to be one or two cars, right? This is going to be a few more than that. And again, the support has been there from industry. We think of these types of things in Indiana as public-private partnerships, right? So this is not the state going in and saying we're going to do all of this. No, we really want to work with industry, collaborate, and make sure that the types of investments we're making in innovation are really driving private sector outcomes as well.
Is that collaborative element, is that something that's always been there, or is that a pivot to some degree?
I think it's a unique characteristic of the innovation ecosystem in Indiana. A lot of the work we do driving innovation, entrepreneurship, access to capital is through public-private partnerships. Again, it's a way for state investments to be catalyzing to induce private sector investment, right? And ultimately, if we're not driving, private sector investment and innovation, then we're not doing our jobs.
Pleased to have Paul Mitchell joining us now for the rest of this discussion here as well, and so many different angles that I think Paul can take with this. But one thing I'm really curious about, David, is this building that we find ourselves in here, the EMC squared, right, is what it's called, and you could talk more about what exactly that stands for. But it serves not just as the home of the Indy Autonomous Challenge, but this is really the hub of that push for the next generation of talent coming to the state that you've been talking about already.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, certainly the building itself, but even the campus where the building is located is really focused on technology and innovation. So EMC squared, clever naming for us, Emerging Manufacturing Collaboration Center. Obviously, from the name, you understand emerging manufacturing. So we're really focused on what has traditionally been a strength for the state of Indiana, advanced manufacturing, and making sure, again, that we're driving the edge on what technologies and innovations are being adopted or available out in the private sector, and making sure that Indiana is driving that edge. So it only made sense to have the Autonomous Challenge, which is pushing that boundary for autonomous technology, to set up shop within the Emerging Manufacturing Collaboration Center, EMC Squared. EMC Squared itself is on a larger tech campus called the 16 Tech Park here, and the investments that the state and the private sector are making here in this space, again, make it an area where it made sense. It made perfect sense to have Indy Autonomous Challenge set up a garage, and store the cars and do the work here. Again, and even beyond that, just down the street from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Yeah, I mean, when we were thinking about what kind of an environment do you need for the home of Indy Autonomous Challenge, where you're going to build up, repair, change out, test, validate the technology that goes into these vehicles, a couple of things we wanted to make sure is its proximity to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the talent pool of advanced motorsports. And really, Indiana has this unique talent pool that knows how to build up, look after, repair these cars. But more than just the motorsports know-how, we needed to be in a place where the robotics, the connectivity, the spectrum management, the advanced computing can all come together. And really, what's cool about this facility is if you walk around, in one part of it, there is a 3D metal printing studio that GE is building up. In another part of it, there's the Indiana 5G zone, which is working on all kinds of communication technology, of course, 5G, but also private networks and spectrum management, which we utilize in our vehicles. There's a battery technology company that's building out a dry room facility where you can do battery prototype manufacturing. Obviously, our cars have actually substantial batteries in them. Even though they're not fully electric, there's a pretty good sized lithium battery that's in there to power all of the computers and subsystems so that they're not drawing off the engine, which we need every horsepower on that engine to provide propulsion for the cars. So, the idea that you can be working on a problem that's IEC related, but go knock on the door and find out maybe there's a 3D printed part. Maybe there's somebody that understands the battery space that can tell us why we're having power management issues. We can go talk to whether it's AWS or Verizon or others who are active here about cloud computing or spectrum management. That idea to pull all those things together in a facility, in an urban environment in Indianapolis, made this a perfect home, and one that teams from around the world come to throughout the year and can do their work here and feel like they have the tools and the resources that they would have back in their university lab environments.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything that Paul said is accurate. I mean, it really is designed to be, that collaboration space in addition to the technology and the innovation. And really, we're only just getting started. I mean, EMC Squared as a place where that type of innovation happens in a collaborative environment, we're just getting started. I think there's a lot more to come there.
It's really interesting. I'm curious how the established tech-focused companies that are already here in Indianapolis, what have they thought when this kind of popped up there in their backyard? I'm sure they're stopping and taking note because we talked about the competition for talent earlier. I'm sure a lot of these companies are looking at the talent that's working on these cars as part of the university teams and thinking, how do I tap into this?
Absolutely, as they should.
Right.
I mean, this is top global talent. There's plenty of global companies here in Indianapolis and in Indiana that are looking at these students, these PhDs, these researchers that are working on the cars. But even just the companies that work on the cars themselves. I mean, there is. I have yet to meet a person who walks by this car and isn't intrigued.
Right.
It obviously looks different than what they're used to seeing. It's familiar enough, but different enough, and everyone is intrigued by the idea. No joysticks, click enter, run. Right? Like, I mean, it's cross-sector interest in that type of technology being developed here.
I think in some ways, we've tried through our partnership with the state to view the vehicle as a representation of this motorsports heritage, this manufacturing heritage, and now this kind of economy of the future, technology innovation focus, right? So kind of these historical capabilities and this new committed focus that the state has, and it's working in the sense that like the car itself gets a lot of attention from the general public, from global media, but also as David's sharing, from a lot of corporations. I mean, we've been lucky in that every time we need a new key component for the car, generally speaking, we were able to source that from either the market leader or the close to market leader within that domain space. And we don't have to have too many phone calls or discussions before they're like, yes, I'm all in. How do we support? How do we get involved? And so part of our objective too is for those companies to understand what's happening in the ecosystem here within Indiana. Doesn't necessarily mean that Continental is going to move from Germany to Indiana, but as they're thinking about their innovation hubs in the United States and what they're doing, it helps. I think we've always been on the map, but it puts us on a map in a different way, not just as a place where we're known for building legacy cars and running legacy motorsports, but you're doing the same kind of tech that one might expect to find exclusively in Silicon Valley or areas outside of Boston or the corridor between Boston and Washington D.C.
And it probably could have been done just as like a showpiece.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, quite honestly, we probably could have said, hey, look at it and maybe
run it once around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway
at a low speed, right? Like, we are really pushing the envelope, as those who have watched or been to the events that we've held, the cars are going fast.
Yes.
The technology is being pushed to the very edge of its limits, right? And I think that's attractive. Obviously, that's attractive to the companies that have already engaged with the Indy Autonomous Challenge. Again, now it's not just the technology and the innovation, but it's the real test bed to say, like, this is what it should do. Does it do that when we're going 190 miles an hour?
Right,
David. One thing I was thinking about is this transition that we're making to running. We've only run events in the U.S., right? We run here in Indianapolis, in Las Vegas. We had one in Texas. But this transition to running overseas and going to Europe, it was not an easy decision, right? It's a big investment in time and resources, and it's fraught with risks. Anytime you take $1 million machines and bring them overseas and deliver them to a place they've never run before, there's always a lot that has to go behind that. And so, for Indy Autonomous Challenge, we don't make those kinds of decisions without close coordination with our commercial partners, our industry partners, who are quite excited about it because they have a lot of operations in Europe, and there's a lot of fan base and marketing opportunity there. But it was also equally important that we talk to the state, and I just how that opportunity is viewed by the state. Maybe you can speak to, like, what are you looking to achieve out of this opportunity to go to Monza and to bring this story to Europe?
Look, Indiana competes on a global stage, so the Indy Autonomous Challenge should also compete on a global stage. So I can think of no better thing for us to do than to be able to take Indy Autonomous Challenge and bring it to Monza. I mean, of all the places we could have picked, Monza's like pretty darn high up there, right? And Northern Italy, the connection between Italy and Indiana is strong industry wise. There's a ton, but like just beyond that, Indiana businesses compete on a global stage. Indiana competes on a global stage for talent. Indiana competes on a global stage for investment. So the idea that Indy Autonomous Challenge should also be global, in many ways, was pretty straightforward decision to make. To be able to say this is a live, moving, active piece of technology, machinery that is a walking, driving, I guess, rolling embodiment of Indiana.
Hopefully driving fast.
Yes.
Versus,
yes. How about that?
Versus crawling or rolling, although sometimes it crawls and rolls.
But it is a real life embodiment of what goes on in Indiana. Extremely high tech, extremely well built. Example of the type of collaboration and innovation that goes on here. So yeah, it made a lot of sense to be able to say to folks who will be at the Milan Motor Show, that will be seeing the cars on the track for the first time at Monza, again, of all places, and not just for the Italians, but all the teams that will be coming down and utilizing that time to explore what it means to get the car on a road track.
Can you give some examples of how this message resonates when you're taking this story overseas as you do, or elsewhere within the country? Do eyes kind of open? Do people start to look at the state in a different way when you start to tell this story? Yeah,
I think, as Paul mentioned, it's economy of the future, right? So, we knew that Indiana did racing. Oh, we didn't realize that Indiana was investing in autonomous technology as part of the investments that we're making. And I think you see as our governor, as our Secretary of Commerce, they're not shy about going around the world and going on these international missions and delegations to tell that story, to say, we've got great universities, we've got great people, we have great technology, we have an awesome quality of life in Indiana and an ability to build things here and do things here that you can't do anywhere else. And so again, I think there's a lot of opportunity to expose people to Indiana again in a way they've never been exposed before.
Yeah.
I've traveled quite a bit as part of my job and my career. And people know a few things about Indiana. Indy 500 comes up there pretty often. The Pacers come up there pretty often as well. Sometimes the Colts, depending on what
decade they were alive.
That's true.
It's sometimes people don't think of much else. We're giving them something else to think about.
Yeah.
I think the idea of it being the ultimate conversation starter or like dinner talk. But then there's more to it than just the shiny object or the wow factor, right? Because, I think everybody intuitively understands that you don't get a race car to go autonomously at 180 miles an hour without a ton of overlapping and coordinated innovation and effort and work. And I don't know if we got into it earlier in the conversations, but, and David's tenure with the IEDC's 5+ years. So, he's been there from the beginning when, the state made a bet on an idea. It wasn't called Indy Autonomous Challenge. It was just a paragraph and a PowerPoint presentation from Energy Systems Network, the organization I've led for a number of years, along with some other ideas in the alternative energy and transportation space. But, one of them was, autonomous racing exhibition at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, right? And whether that was going to be a global prize competition or, as David said, a one-off, vehicle design, the state always said, if we can pull this off, it's going to be a major return on these initial dollars of investment. And so the first seed monies, the first few $100,000, not an insignificant amount of money, but states invested a lot over the years in this. Those first couple $100,000 was really what allowed us to go out and start having the conversations with industry, talk to the universities, build the relationship up with the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and so that vote of faith in an idea. I don't know that happens in every state, right? I think also the fact that I think the people there at the time, David has been there, but that was long enough ago that the people kind of making that initial investment didn't know if it's going to play out in their tenure or their budget cycle, right? A lot of times in government, it's like, you want to do what? Well, what's it going to do in the next 12 months, right? Because we're going to have to show results right away. So placing that bet in a economy of the future idea that was the economy of the maybe not so near future was a big investment and vote of faith by the state.
I got to be careful. I got some other PowerPoints and little paragraphs like, what if we did this? A few years down the line, we may be talking about something completely different based on a paragraph or a PowerPoint.
Sure. So if this is the ultimate conversation starter, you've got me hooked. So then where do you transition? What's next in your elevator pitch?
Yeah, well, I think, we kind of look at the areas in which Indiana has traditionally been industrially focused and industrially strong, right? Manufacturing, one of those, automotive, mobility, one of those, but also sports, right? This is a sports town. Not just, we've been talking about obviously the motorsport, but there's a lot of other sports assets and sports history here, and certainly long term, but also in recent history. Super Bowl hosted here, upcoming NBA All-Star game, right? So we kind of take a look at what those industries are and assess how can technology be applied as not its own vertical, but as a horizontal. How can technology be applied to the automotive industry? How can technology be applied to sports? Sports technology innovations. How can technology be applied to manufacturing? Start talking smart manufacturing, Industry 4.0, Internet of Things, those type of things. So, this is, an investment that, has gone a long way and really, really returned, massive dividends to the state. But there are a lot of other areas where we're looking to make those types of forward-looking investments, again, with the thought that what can we put some dollars behind now that fill a need or a gap or an opportunity to innovate for the private sector that grows well beyond what our initial investment was, and again does start to solve needs and push innovation to a different level.
That kind of triple helix of government, academia, and industry swimming in the same direction is really powerful. And, some of those first dollars in typically have to come from government. But as David said, it wasn't just hey, we're going to fund all of this and see what happens. It was, we'll put some dollars in to see if there's interest. And then there's an expectation that industry and all the logos on the cars behind us and a whole bunch of companies whose logos aren't even on there are going to have to invest and put their resources into it. And from the academic world, some of these teams are 10, 12 PhD student deep. And they're not just any PhD students. They're studying AI, machine learning, vehicle telemetry, sensor fusion. So these are like very in-demand areas of research, and that costs those institutions, those countries, a lot of resources themselves, right? So that, collectively you're able to get, maybe something north of $100 million invested in an overall program by the government, stepping in and providing some of those initial foundational investments. And I think that one thing Indiana's done well is each step of the way, the question is always, what is the match?
Yeah.
Which industry, which corporate partners are going to come alongside this? I think there's a certain respect for the international universities as well, but what are the industry investments that this is going to generate? And the reality is, if you're all swimming in the same direction, government, academia, and industry, usually the outcomes have those positive public policy, maybe idealistic things that perhaps are priorities in Indiana, but maybe priorities in other states, whether it's sustainability or road safety. But doing it in that collaborative manner is what's been successful.
Yeah, I think there's no use in us thinking about this as an investment that was made in a vacuum. It wasn't. Right? Like there were outside partners, there were industry partners, there were universities, there were, and that's a basic requirement, right? There's no sense in us looking at investments that don't have that type of buy-in. We're not the experts. We know the experts, and we're interested in how the state can play a constructive role in catalyzing those type of investments. It's the same approach we take with entrepreneurship and venture capital, right? Like, how can we play a role de-risking, catalyzing private sector investment to provide runway to do something really cool.
I want to ask your thoughts, David, on kind of the concept of entrepreneurship and how you and how the state of Indiana sort of defines that. And one of the observations I've had with Indy Autonomous Challenge is you walk around the paddock and you see these brilliant minds working on the cars. And I view them all as entrepreneurs, right? They're all solving problems. They're all working on a limited budget. They're all trying to do something that somebody else hasn't done, or try to exponentially improve somebody else's work, but not necessarily are all all of them going to go out and found a company and raise venture capital to do it? Some of them I think will and are already starting to.
Yeah.
But sort of how do you view this kind of concept of entrepreneurship and define that within the context of the state?
Yeah, very broadly, right? And I think you said the words, Paul, problem solvers, right? Seeing problems as opportunities is big. And I'm a firm believer that the mindset that you just described is applicable whether you choose to actually go into business on your own and be an owner and raise money or take a loan, or whether you end up being someone else's co-founder or first, second, third employee, or the employee at a large enterprise that there's a lot of innovation that comes out of large enterprises as well. And so I think the entrepreneurial mindset is applicable whether you go off and start your own company or not. And I think in Indiana, we have this history of entrepreneurship. Some of the companies that people associate with Indiana literally bear the name of the entrepreneur who started them. Right, like that's there's
Cook,
no
Eli Lilly,
right.
Yeah.
There's a clear example of what it means to be an entrepreneur. All started from kind of small beginnings, right? And I think when we think about how do we invest in the future entrepreneurs, right? There's a lot of direct entrepreneur support programming that we invest in, but it's also investing in the innovations and the technologies that may be the companies of tomorrow, could be the companies of 50 years down the road. Not sure, right? Sometimes we get the technology right, but it takes 30 years to get a business around it.
Sure.
Other times it's a little bit more immediate. And so I think there's an ecosystem in Indiana that supports innovation and entrepreneurship. It's a strong ecosystem. The survivability of companies that do start here is tops in the nation. And so that opportunity to support entrepreneurs of various kinds, and whether they're actually running their own company or even running a seventh generation family-owned company that their
pivoting
ancestors had started years ago. We take a pretty broad view of what it means to be an entrepreneur. It helps that, my boss is an entrepreneur, right? And that we have an entrepreneurial spirit that's guiding the way we think about economic development in the state and the investments that we make.
I like the idea that concept of it. An entrepreneurial mindset is what you're really working to cultivate, whether or not they all become entrepreneurs in the, let's say, Webster's dictionary definition sense.
Really hard to measure, but like everybody has a sense that that's a really good thing.
Yeah.
Right. Like the entrepreneurial mindset makes like better workers, more innovative, absolutely more companies, but better citizens. I mean, there's a sense that this is the right type of investment to be making in people.
Anything else from you, Paul?
Just, one of the topics we try to hit on each of these conversations is AI.
Sure.
And I think, as somebody who's part of government, trying to understand, the perspective of AI in society at a state level. Obviously, there's a lot of national conversations, international conversations about whether AI is a good thing, is a bad thing. We try to think about the use cases of AI, and clearly in Indy Autonomous Challenge, it's around saving lives through making mobility safer, not just for race cars, but passenger cars that we're in now and in the future. But obviously, there's all kinds of other applications of AI, ChatGPT and these kinds of things. Do you have a perspective on this in terms of Indiana's innovation ecosystem? Are we embracing the emergence of AI? Are we resistant to it? Are we just keeping an eye on it? Sort of any comments on that?
I can tell you that our high school entrepreneurs are looking into it.
Maybe using it to write their essays.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I think it's becoming more and more pervasive. It's not lost on me that in judging a high school pitch competition here in Indianapolis last week, out of 10 of the pitches, I think fully on 7 of them were essentially AI applied to this problem,
Oh, wow.
AI applied to this problem. And, some of them were AI applied to school, AI applied to sports, AI applied to, volunteer activities, right? Like, but in the same way that I think, there was a boom of internet applied to machines, internet applied to cars, internet applied to your personal life and the devices that you carry.
Yeah.
I think that same type of thing is kind of going on, right? Like right now.
And you're seeing it come out of the younger generation, right?
Yeah,
Kids
let
coming out of
alone
high
what
school
we're seeing.
Who are forming their sense of innovation and entrepreneurship with the existence of these tools that many of us
it's
are
baked
kind
in.
of
It's baked into their mindset already. They don't have to adapt like we do.
No. And so all that to say, certainly, large corporations are looking into this. The state makes investments in, data analysis and smart manufacturing and sensorization of equipment and those types of things. But to me, the more telling trend is just the fact that, high school entrepreneurs who are having maybe their first kind of idea or interaction with entrepreneurship ever, like this is what they're going to.
They can't imagine an outcome without it. It sounds like
that's
that's taken for granted. Super interesting. Wow. Well, a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing some time and all the support as well for the Indy Autonomous Challenge. Hope to see you out at a racetrack here pretty soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it.
Well, certainly for those listening, there's a likelihood that they've got a bent towards this entrepreneurial spirit that we're talking about right here. And if this is sounding like an environment in which they would like to lodge themselves, what would you suggest in terms of reaching out and seeking out the support of the state of Indiana?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say there's obvious conduits through the Indy Autonomous Challenge. Our team is active across the state, across the globe. We at the IEDC, we obviously are focused on economic development, entrepreneurial development, investments in innovation. Our website is certainly available for people to learn a little bit more about where we're making investments in the economy of the future, those advanced industries, those accelerators that we're investing in, those innovation public-private partnerships that we're launching and building. And if I may, just even tease, we do have what should be a really innovative solution for a state to invest in, a soon to be launched portal, which is solely designed to connect entrepreneurs and innovators with resources in the state of Indiana that can help their business grow, access capital, access advising, and connect with other innovators and entrepreneurs. Yet to come, really exciting things that kind of continue this legacy of innovation.
I assume that portal will be identifiable through the Indiana Economic Development Corporation's website when it's ready and when it's the right time, and there'll probably be
identifiable
fanfare around
It'll be identifiable on the website. It'll be, I think, identifiable
around the
in
world.
Markets across the globe, and a big part of what we talk about when we go out and participate in events alongside Indy Autonomous Challenge, certainly.
I'll just add to that we've seen through the IEC, we've seen students from some of the universities that have developed relationships and interests in Indiana and are thinking about either creating companies here or if they're from another country, perhaps they're founding the company in that home country, but they know they're going to need a North American site or jumping off point. And I think the other observation is the marketing that you see from Indy Autonomous Challenge typically generates an understanding that there's some linkage back to Indiana.
Right.
And we're going to work really hard as we go forward at more events to make that even more front and center and help people make that connection that the Indy Autonomous Challenge is really all about Indiana's innovation ecosystem.
Tangible example. One of the corporate partners for the Indy Autonomous Challenge essentially gave exposure through their own network of companies and startups that they're interacting with, that somebody learned about the cool stuff that's going on in Indiana. That founder, reached out, connected, and is now exploring the opportunity to go through an advanced mobility accelerator that the state sponsors every year here in Indianapolis. I think that's a tangible example of how there's engagement, and that is a global company that's not from the United States that's looking at coming and making that accelerator a part of their growth strategy.
That's going to do it this week on the Inside Track. Big thanks again to David Watkins, Senior Vice President of the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, for sharing his insight on what the future of the automotive manufacturing field might look like and how Indiana is holding fast as a hub of cutting-edge technology.